Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Point Podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well on this Monday following a big weekend. I'm back after a little bit of hiatus. Last week, just life things came up. I ended up going to a Memorial Cup game, which was awesome. Spent some time with some friends I hadn't seen in a while, so had a little bit of a breather. Didn't have time to fit in the show, but I'm back this week. We got Canada Day coming up, and it's a good day to talk because obviously the NHL season is over. We're going to dive into all of that today. But it's a bittersweet day for me. I always talk on the podcast when the NFL season ends, and that's really a depression for me. It's tough for me to rebound after that, quite frankly. I miss it so much. And even now with the NHL finishing, the NBA is over, the draft, although NBA free agency does open on Friday, so there's a silver lining there. But it's a sad day. The NHL is over. Normally, the non-sports fans in your life love this day because there's no more hockey to watch. There's no more sports. We have 2 more games left in the CHL, the Memorial Cup, with the semifinal tonight and the final going on Wednesday. But after that, it's going to be a number of months without hockey. It's going to be a month plus without the NFL. And it does open up the time and for the space and the opportunity for other sports to shine. This next month and change is where baseball, I think, has to hit it out of the park. It has to be exciting. There has to be something that people want to watch. It has to be interesting races, home run chases, what have you. But it's also sad because there's nights where you're like, well, what am I going to watch? You're searching for television. And thankfully, with my computer and my streaming services, which are getting more and more pricey, but I don't complain about that price because that's just I need to do. It's with the job here, I need to watch everything. And that's something I have to pay for. Baseball is at a premium. If you only have Bell, which I have, or if you have cable, they really only show Blue Jays games, which is fine if you're a Blue Jays fan. I'm not a Blue Jays fan. I watch a lot of Blue Jays because it's all that's on TV, but I watch a lot of Cardinals. I'm going to watch more Cardinals coming up. The Brewers are even more interesting. That whole division is interesting to me, the National League Central. We'll talk about that today. And there's going to be different storylines. There's going to be different stuff. We're going to talk baseball. We're also going to talk NHL with the drafts next week. I've got a lot of takes on that. We'll talk about that as we get closer to it. With NHL free agency on July 13th. It's a couple weeks away. So there's lots to discuss. There's lots to dive into. We got the World Juniors this summer in Edmonton. So there's going to be that part of it, which is weird, but also I'm excited about that because it's content. It's a tournament. There's young stars. There's the next players. I'm interested in if NHL teams allow their prospects to go. Certain guys that come to mind are Owen Power, who were there in December. Mason McTavish, who is there. Luca Cormier, closer to home. Does he get the okay to go? So there's going to be interesting things to watch this summer on the NHL front and on the sports outside of the summer sports, if you will. Baseball, the CFL is something that we'll cover more. And, we got Wimbledon this week as well. Wimbledon is starting up today. It's my favorite major. I love it. And I'll get more into it. This really started with my grandfather watching tennis, and he's gotten me into it, and I haven't missed a major since. And I don't plan to miss many matches at this year's Wimbledon. I have the first round taping to watch when I get home tonight, so that's something to look forward to. But let's start on the ice today because, like I said off the top, the 2022 NHL season is over. We have a new Stanley Cup champion. The Colorado Avalanche, defeated the Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games last night, finally capping an end. I thought it was going to be over Friday. Tampa had too much resolve. They pushed it to 6, but Tampa did not have enough in the tank. Colorado was just a better team, and they win another Stanley Cup. And there's lots to talk about. There's so many great storylines with the Colorado Avalanche. And the first one I want to point out here today is Nathan McKinnon. Because prior to last night, I thought Nathan McKinnon was having a lackluster season. I thought he was okay. I don't think he was a big factor. And he was just a guy out there. I thought he was pressing. I thought he was trying too hard. He had an open net in Game 5 through the wickets. He puts that home 100 out of 100 times in the regular season. But through all of that, games where he should have been better, games where Valeri Nichushkin was a superstar and Nathan McKinnon was just a guy on the outside, in the biggest game of his career, in the biggest game for the Colorado Avalanche since the 2001 season where they won the Stanley Cup, he delivered. He was clutch. He was the difference maker. He gets a goal and assist. He's all around the game. And what I liked most about his effort last night was that he rebounded. To me, the first goal of the game scored by Steven Stamkos was 100% Nathan McKinnon's fault. He gets involved physically with Nikita Kucherov along the boards. And McKinnon is out of position. He's taking Kucherov, who's a right winger. That's not his man. Being a center iceman, Stamkos is in front. He's getting involved physically, but he's also roughhousing because he's frustrated. He's upset with Kucherov. Eventually, Kucherov fights to get the puck to Palat. Palat pokes it out front. Stamkos puts it through the wickets. This was McKinnon's fault. It was a breakdown. It was a lack of judgment. He shouldn't have been there. You could say, well, he took the guy with the puck. He was close to him. Okay, well, your man, you didn't have anybody cover for you. It's like in basketball. If you don't have somebody playing defense, if your man scores, that's on you because that's your responsibility. To me, that was Nathan McKinnon's fuck up. And at the time, I'm like, that's a bad start to tonight's game. But from then on, he played his best game. He rebounded. He scored a big goal. He set up Arturi Lehkonen. He was the man. For years, Nathan McKinnon has been in the same conversation as Connor McDavid, in the same conversation as Austin Matthews, whoever you want to put it, the best players in the NHL. My list is a lot different than most people. I like my list. People can keep theirs. But Nathan McKinnon's always in the top 5. Could be mainstream media, the new media, or just Noah Warren's brain. But normally, Nathan McKinnon's pretty close to the top. And last night, he proved why. He finished the postseason with 14 goals. He finished the postseason with over 30 points. And the Colorado Avalanche capped off a postseason where they only had 4 losses. 2 sweeps and a pair of 6-game series against their rival, the St. Louis Blues, a Stanley Cup champion in 2019, and the Tampa Bay Lightning, the 2-time reigning defending Stanley Cup champions. They swept Connor McDavid. They swept the Nashville Predators. And to be honest, the St. Louis Blues series was a lot closer, was a lot more threatening, was a lot more worrisome than this Stanley Cup final. Ever since Nico Sturm scored the goal to tie the game in Game 4 at 2-2, I thought the series was over. That goal signed, sealed, and delivered the series to me. It went one more game than I thought. But in that moment, Tampa didn't have the guys to break through. Tampa didn't have the legs to keep going. They were battered. They were beaten. And I'm sure the Colorado Avalanche had their fair share of injuries. Nazem Kadri, well documented. Valeri Nichushkin. But the top guys for Colorado and the fact that Colorado had more depth turned out to be that much more important. Arturi Lehkonen, a deadline acquisition, a damn good one, I might add, has 3 series-clinching goals in his NHL career. Conference final last year, the Montreal Canadiens against the Vegas Golden Knights. Conference finals this season against the Edmonton Oilers, also in overtime. And then last night, the second period, he beats Vasilevsky over the shoulder. That's a great deadline acquisition. Josh Manson. Was Josh Manson not solid on the back end? Was Josh Manson not just a great just a great presence. Playing with Bowen Byram, allowing him to play up in the play, allowing him to become even a better defenseman as the playoffs went along. I'd say Josh Manson was a good trade. I've been saying teams should be trading for Josh Manson for years. Finally, the team that does it wins. So in a way, that validates me as well, but I won't take all the credit. Andrew Cagliano, the 35-year-old who's been around Edmonton, Anaheim, been through a lot of wars. The Stanley Cup Finals, been deep in postseasons. Colorado picks him up for next to nothing. And he comes up with key block shots, goals in certain situations, good speed, and the fourth line of Colorado was a fantastic line throughout the playoffs. Another pretty good deadline acquisition. It didn't matter what Joe Sakic did. It seemed to be the right decision. It seemed to be the right move. And sometimes you could chop it up to as simple as that. Brandon Hagel was pretty good for the Tampa Bay Lightning, but he couldn't score a goal. He couldn't. And it didn't turn out to be as good of a deadline acquisition. You go throughout the lineup. Riley Nash was okay. He wasn't good enough. The depth for Colorado was better, and the best players, Colorado just had more good players than Tampa did. No, Braden Point hurt. But I look at Joe Sakic, and he's stepping into rarefied territory here. He went from one of the greatest players in league history, top 20, top 25 player, scores a golden goal at the 2002 Olympics, and now he's a Stanley Cup champion in his own right, and now he's a Stanley Cup champion GM, where he built a Stanley Cup winning team at his alma mater, where he did it on the ice. Who can be elite player and elite GM? It's rare that a great player can be good at coach or general manager. Wayne Gretzky sucked by his own admission. There's lots of coaches. You don't see many that are great players try to step into it. Rick Tocchet is a good coach. Wasn't a superstar player. Craig Berube is not a superstar player. Go through the players. What Joe Sakic is doing, he's crazy good. Steve Yzerman doesn't get credit for the Tampa Bay success because he left to go to Detroit. But he's another guy. He's another unicorn where you can be an all-time great player and build such successful teams. That's a huge storyline for me, is what he has done. The fact that Joe Sakic had to go through a season where the Colorado Avalanche had 47 points after, I think his friend, his former teammate, Patrick Waugh, quit on the team. That seems to be what he always does, is quit. Patrick Waugh quits on the Colorado, I can't even say Colorado, I don't know why today. Colorado Avalanche, a week prior to the start of the season. Jared Bednar comes in. I'll be honest with you. I didn't know Jared Bednar. Hadn't really heard of him. But since he's got to Colorado, he's won a Coach of the Year. He finished second in the Coach of the Year, and he's won a Stanley Cup. Pretty good little resume. Pretty good little career for a guy I had never heard of, who was an assistant coach for Jimmy Playfair in Calgary a number of years ago. He won a Calder Cup. He's been throughout the world. But Joe Sakic, could have fired Bednar last year. They lose in the second round. It's a frustrating exit. He doesn't. He doesn't overreact. He keeps a good coach, and they come back and win it. Sakic deserves credit. Bednar deserves credit for having that perseverance, for the locker room staying united. Kadri. I am really happy for Nazem Kadri. I am a Nazem Kadri fan. I love the way he plays the game, and there's one big reason for it. It has nothing to do with his Toronto past. It has nothing to do with that trade. That's irrelevant to me. Leaf fans can hate Nazem Kadri. They can love Nazem Kadri. I could give a shit. What I love about Nazem Kadri is that he wants to compete. He wants to play. In the game today, in sports, you need to will guys into playing. There's load management, there's injuries, there's always seems to be something. And you need to tell the players, could you please play tonight? Could you please play? Could you please come do your job? Nazem Kadri had a broken thumb. He couldn't tie his skates, and yet he said, I'm not missing out on this opportunity. I'm not missing out on playing in a Stanley Cup final, getting a game-winning goal in overtime. He had self-inflicted wounds, suspended 3 times in the playoffs, ridiculed. Yes, by his own admission. But I'll still take a guy who will go into the corner head first than the guy that pulls up, which has happened too often. He's a guy that's been harassed for his religion, for his skin color in this year's playoffs, and it's bullshit. But he gets the last laugh. He gets to tell all those people in St. Louis, in Toronto, Kyle Dubas, everyone to shove it. Or in his words, to kiss my ass, which I'm happy about. That was a great soundbite. Sure, people that are, you can say, well, it's petty. That's immature. What's immature? Who isn't immature nowadays? Look at the people in high esteem in our world. They're the most immature people on earth. Nazem Kadri delivered. He deserved to take a shot at whoever the hell he wanted to. People don't like it, grow up. Go back to your glass house. Go back on your keyboard and write whatever you want. Make fun of him. But all I know is Nazem Kadri's a champion, and all those people that said he'll never win, he's a cancer, they're not. Because you're probably rooting for St. Louis or you're rooting for Toronto. So I know you're not a champion because you didn't win. I'm happy for him. He's going to have a great summer. He just won a Stanley Cup. He's going to get a big, big contract from somebody. He'll get overpaid by somebody. That's not his problem. Somebody wants to give you a contract, you're not going to say no. Could be too much money. Could be all of the above. It does not matter. You're worth what somebody is willing to pay you. That's life. Sometimes it's just about being at the right place at the right time. For Naz, he was. Colorado was good to him. He was good to Colorado. Because they're not winning without Nazem Kadri. Point blank. Colorado, I could talk about Nikushkin, who had a great run. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. Great postseason. Was a warrior, was a Mack truck out there. Fantastic. It's going to get to Tampa. I got to talk about Cale Makar. Almost forgot about Cale Makar. I can't get past him. Cale Makar. He's unbelievable. 23 years old. Same age as yours truly. I'd make the argument he's been a little bit more successful than me. It's splitting hairs, but he's probably been a little bit more successful than me at 23. But nevertheless, Norris, Conn Smythe, same year. Not bad. Duncan Keith did it. But Cale Makar is... I've never seen a defenseman like him. What was shocking last night on a play was, if you were watching the game, it's about midway through the first period. Makar had the puck at the point, and he was moving his feet so fast, stick handling, and Palat got a stick in there to break it up, and he pushed the puck out of the zone. It was after a long shift. And it was so surprising that Makar had somebody stop him. That Palat made a play on the puck. That was the most surprising, was that somebody actually stopped him because he was that dominant in this year's playoffs. He was unbelievable. To me, it wasn't even close who was going to be the Conn Smythe winner. It was Makar all the way. He's 23 years old. This core is still very good. McKinnon's got 1 year left at $6 million. He'll be re-signed. I wouldn't be surprised if it's done this summer. Valeri Nichushkin may walk, although I could see them keeping him. I think they'll find a way. I don't think they'll keep Kadri, but they're going to have Landeskog. They're going to have Rantanen. They'll still have a good team next year. You got Alex Newhook on an entry-level deal. He played great in the playoffs. JT Compher's under contract. Bowen Byram. This team is set up. But to me, Cale Makar is the foundation. You can have good teams and have elite forwards. You need elite forwards to win cups. But to me, having an elite defenseman is far more important than having an elite center or an elite offensive player. Has anybody been more valuable, other than the goaltender, on Tampa than Victor Hedman over the last 3 years? You could argue no. Was anybody more valuable than Drew Doughty on those 2012 and 2014 teams? Was anybody more valuable than Duncan Keith? Having an elite defenseman is a prerequisite. I used to think it was a goaltender, but Colorado is an elite team with adequate goaltending. So, to me, we got to see how the next couple cups go. If there's teams that have average goaltending win. But to me, if those teams are going to win, they're going to have an elite defenseman. Edmonton doesn't have an elite defenseman. Toronto has elite Austin Matthews. They don't have an elite defenseman. Calgary doesn't have an elite defenseman. Go through the teams. 2 teams that made the cup final this year do. They won. They got there. New York has an elite defenseman, Adam Fox. These teams are getting far. It is a prerequisite to win. It's more important to have that number one guy that can log 30 minutes a game than it is to have an elite center. That, to me, is becoming more and more clear. Because teams that have the great offensive players, yes, it's nice. But I'd rather have an elite defenseman. I'd rather have that guy that can log the minutes. Why did Lidstrom win? Why did Chris Letang win? Go through history. Why did Zdeno Chara win with the Bruins? They had a good team. They didn't have a great team. Yeah, Nathan Horton was a good player. Tim Thomas. Big Z didn't help that team. You go through last 10 years. 2010, Duncan Keith. 2011, Zdeno Chara. 2012, Drew Doughty. 2013, Duncan Keith. 2014, Drew Doughty. 2015, Duncan Keith. 2016, Chris Letang. 2017, Chris Letang. 2018, John Carlson. 2019, Alex Pietrangelo. You just go through it. Hedman, then Makar. An elite defenseman is a prerequisite to win. That is what you need to win. So, that, to me, is what teams need to look for. That's what teams need to identify. Have your number one defenseman and build from there. Because if you can build a great team, and maybe if you have, we'll see, again, the next couple of years are really the identifier. Because the last 2 years prior to this, Andrei Vasilevsky was the best goaltender in the world, and Tampa won. So I'm not ready to say you can have average goaltending and win multiple cups. I'm not willing to say that yet. Colorado might lose Darcy Kemper. He's an average goaltender. He's an unrestricted free agent, but that's all that's available on the free agent market is average goaltending. I've heard Sergei Bobrovsky is not actually on the market. They're not going to move him. So your options are limited on who you can acquire. And we'll wait and see what comes of it, because that's where I see the league going, is building from the back end out on how you build a successful team. Tampa loses the series last night. They had won 11 straight playoff rounds, which is incredible. And for Tampa, it's, you saw the emotion on the guys. They wanted it so bad to win 3 in a row. They wanted to be in the history books as one of the great teams, and they still will be because of what they've accomplished. But you look at this group and what they've gone through. The first year they won the cup, Steven Stamkos played 3 minutes and 14 seconds, and they won a cup. Last year, they went through a ton of adversity. Victor Hedman didn't play that well, and they won. McDonough stepped up. Again, and Stamkos was a bit piece. This year, Braden Point's hurt in the first round. He barely plays the rest of the playoffs, doesn't play 2 full series. They still get to a Stanley Cup final, and this is the year where Steven Stamkos steps up and plays his best hockey, was a superstar throughout the playoffs. And one thing that Stamkos said last night that I completely agree with is, I don't believe Tampa's done. I think it's going to get more and more difficult for them to compete. They're getting older. They're battered. Andre Palat might leave the team, which will really hurt them. He's such a good player. Any team should look to scoop him up. So they're going to have their challenges, for sure. With this roster, with injuries, with surgeries to start next year, you never know what they're going to be. Because to me, Anthony Cirelli clearly was hurt. Eric Chernak clearly was hurt. Kucherov, to me, was hurt the last few games. Braden Point, obviously, wasn't playing. This team was put together with duct tape, and they battled to get this far. And I just have to, you have to look at this team and just appreciate what they did. To get the 3 straight Stanley Cup finals in this cap era, to battle this much. John Cooper for he's the longest tenured head coach in the NHL. And for him to keep the group focused, to keep the group on task is really, really impressive. And he was going to coach the Olympic team this year. To me, he's still on task for that. And I don't rule out this team. Yes, the East is competitive. It's going to get better. Washington becomes more and more dangerous for me because of Nick Backstrom going on long-term IR. They can use that freed up money. Maybe they sign an Nazem Kadri to make a splash that way. With another center iceman to pair with Ovechkin and the guys down there. But this team just battles. They find a way. And all they have to do next year is get into the playoffs, and then anything can happen. They were on the road every series. To start a series this year, they're on the road every one. They got to a Stanley Cup final. They just find a way to get through. They find a way to battle. They find a way. And I expect them next year to find a way. They're still going to have Cirelli. They're still going to have Stamkos. They're still going to have Hedman. Vasilevsky's still in net. They're going to have some good. Braden Point will likely be back healthy. So that they're going to have the pieces, the main guys to try to get back to the top of the mountain. It's going to get more and more hard for this team. But I doubted Colorado all year. And it's different when you're playing a team that has no pedigree of winning. Say Colorado played New York in the final. Well, neither team has had much success. Neither team's been close to winning a cup in the last 5 years. Second round doesn't count as being close to winning a cup, in my opinion. You got to be at least the conference final. You got to sniff the second round doesn't count. You're not a Stanley Cup contender if you're out in the second round. So in that series, I look at it as a 50-50. I look at the better team in the regular season, the better team in the playoffs to win. Because you know why? You have no history of winning, but you're the better team. And they have no history of winning. They're not as good as you. Anybody that plays Tampa, unless it's Colorado, I'm going to look at the East and say, well, I don't have all that much faith in you beating this team because you haven't yet. You haven't broken through. Tampa has been the class of the Eastern Conference the last 3 years. You played them, you'll lose. The Islanders tried to get through them. Toronto tried to get through them. Boston tried to get through them. New York, Florida twice. It doesn't matter. They've beaten the best teams that the Eastern Conference has had to offer. And maybe finally they're just going to be like a boxer on his 50th fight, and you're going to be a little bit punch drunk, and you'll eventually knock him out. You'll be like the Bulls in the 90s where the Celtics got old. Larry Bird had injuries. His back was spasming, and eventually the Bulls got by them, and they started their own dynasty. Maybe a team will do that. But until I see it happen, I will have faith in this Tampa Bay Lightning team to get back to the final, to compete, and to still be a Stanley Cup contender. Because they have the nucleus of the team, and I don't think this team's going to be more motivated than ever to go win it. Because they were so close this year and they didn't grasp it. They didn't grab hold of it. And they're going to want redemption for that loss. But this season was very good for the NHL. It had its ups and downs. It had a shutdown for COVID in December, which is never something that you want. It's not compelling. It costs you to play into almost July here. July 1st is in 4 days. Pushes back free agency. Next year, you got to get back on track. COVID can't be a topic. Gary Bettman was not handing out the cup last night because he had COVID. I don't know why people are testing anymore, but that's beyond the point. Let's not get political today. But you saw some stars emerge. Cale Makar, Austin Matthews had a great year. That's always good for you got a Canadian team get to a conference final. The New York Rangers are back in the mainstream media. They're back to being a good team. That's a good thing for the league. And you had a very competitive Stanley Cup final. And you had a team that's extremely marketable win the Stanley Cup. That's something that's good. To me, the Stanley Cup final was very good, and it was two teams that you could root for. This wasn't a New Jersey, LA final in 2012 where people didn't like it because it's New Jersey, a market not that many people care about, and LA, a team that plays out west and they play late, nobody watches them. Colorado is known because they have Nathan McKinnon. Colorado is known because they have Cale Makar for all the players they got. Tampa is known because they've dominated the league. So you look at it that way, there's not many negatives to look at the Stanley Cup final. It was competitive. It was entertaining. I enjoyed it. So kudos to the NHL. And let's hope for a good free agency. And we'll talk about that, of course, as we move forward here. With lots of players being up for grabs, lots of different possible destinations. And it's just to see where these guys end up going. There's also news today. And the news is, I didn't really know this. Again, I was just applauding the NHL. I had no clue that the Hall of Fame announcement was today. No clue. So again, that's poor marketing. I try to track things. It didn't work. But the Hall of Fame class of 2022 was just announced about 17 minutes ago because it popped up on my phone. I didn't read it, and so I'm going to read it with all of you right now because I saw it pop up. I only saw one name at the top. But the class of 2022, Matt Sundin was an option. There were some players, McGillney, lots of guys that were available. But the class of 2022 in the NHL Hockey Hall of Fame is Daniel and Henrik Sedin, Roberto Luongo, Daniel Alfredsson, Rika Salainen, and Herb Carnegie are the class of 2022. This is it. This is interesting. As you know, I've talked about the Hockey Hall of Fame before. I've talked about Hall of Fames in general. To me, it's not that hard to define a Hall of Famer. Was he ever the best player in his sport? Was he ever considered, one of the GOATs? Did they change his sport? What kind of impact did they have on his sport? So let's go through the list. Daniel and Henrik Sedin are absolutely Hall of Famers. Daniel and Henrik are the all-time leading point getters for the Vancouver Canucks. Daniel and Henrik Sedin led the Vancouver Canucks to a Stanley Cup final. They changed the game because I don't think two line mates, and I don't think we'll ever see it again, have as much chemistry as the Sedin twins did. They came in together. They are known for a great draft story where Brian Burke traded up, drafted them both one after another, and got them to play together. They were comfortable not playing together. They ended up playing with each other their entire career, all in Vancouver. And to me, Henrik was an amazing passer. Daniel could score goals, and they're on one of the great lines in NHL history with Alex Burrows, who is a completely different player, but played perfectly with those two guys. They were the talk of Vancouver. They took over the NHL, and for a brief period of time, they might have been the two best players in the NHL. That might sound crazy, but I really don't think it is. In those late 90s, early 2000s, Daniel and Henrik Sedin were an unstoppable force. They led Vancouver to a President's Trophy in 2011. Daniel and Henrik Sedin are elite players. Like I said, sometimes you need to be the best player in a sport. Maybe I'm picking hairs saying, you're splitting hairs saying they were the best player at some point. Fine. But did they change a sport? I absolutely think they did. Nobody played like they did. They were completely different. They were skilled players, but didn't have skilled bodies. They weren't super great skaters, but they did it their own way. They knew where each other were on the ice, and it's almost like Ovechkin and his perch on the power play. You knew how they were going to score goals, but yet you couldn't stop it. On the power play, Daniel scored more of his goals just about a foot away from the net. They were easy plays. They were great. They had over 100 points multiple times, the both of them. And they have been the face of Vancouver and just faces of the game for a long time. Coming over from Sweden, they've been great ambassadors, great players. Easy. Next, Roberto Luongo. Roberto Luongo is absolutely a Hall of Famer. Roberto Luongo is third all-time in wins. Roberto Luongo has won a gold medal at the Olympics. Roberto Luongo was the goaltender in the 2011 Stanley Cup final with the aforementioned Sedin twins. Luongo has more wins than Patrick Roy. Luongo has more shutouts than Patrick Roy. Roberto Luongo was one of the most consistent goaltenders in the National Hockey League throughout his career. From Florida to Vancouver, back to Florida, Roberto Luongo was ready to play whenever you needed him to. Not only was Roberto Luongo a great goaltender, he was a colorful character. He was a goalie that brought something different to the table. He had a presence on Twitter. He had a good sense of humor. And he was a goalie that wasn't just a guy that stared at the puck, that was a weirdo. Roberto Luongo was completely different. He was a jock goaltender. He was a media darling. He was on Trade Center. He did whatever you needed him to do because he was great at it. And since then, he's pivoted into working in hockey ops, working for the Florida Panthers, getting opportunities to work at the Olympics this past year. Bobby Lou has been a staple of the game, been one of the great players in the NHL, and to me, a top 5 to 7 goaltender all time. And like I said, to me, at one point, he was the best goaltender in the world during his era. Is he better than Dominic Hasek? No. Is he better than Martin Brodeur? No. But to me, he is one of the great goaltenders in the history of the sport. You can't tell the history books of the NHL without Roberto Luongo. You go through the statistics. He was great. He was great in Vancouver, and he was great in Florida. He played for two organizations. He had to do both great things and in both organizations. He put Florida really on the map when they drafted him. He eventually got flipped to Vancouver, and he ended his career back in Florida, where he loved it all along. Now we get to Daniel Alfredsson. This is where I get a little sketchy. I get a little mercurial about this one. Daniel Alfredsson was an enigma. Daniel Alfredsson was a hated player, for sure. We're talking about Nazem Kadri. Daniel Alfredsson was not loved outside of Ottawa. He was a good player with high-end skill, but was, quite frankly, a pain in the ass to play against. He would slash you. He would check you from behind. He was a greasy player with a great slap shot, some great hair at one point, and had a real flair for the game. To me, he was a great captain for Ottawa. He's kind of identified with that city where Ottawa's government, Ottawa is normally disliked because that's where your elected officials live. And they also had an owner that was very unlikable. And yes, he's passed recently. Sorry for that, Eugene. But I think if everybody's being honest, Eugene Melnyk was not loved in the sports world. Daniel Alfredsson was not loved in the sports world outside of Sweden and the greater Ottawa area. With all that being said, he went to the Stanley Cup final in 2007 with the Ottawa Senators, losing the Anaheim Ducks. Had a great playoff run with a memorable team with Ray Emery in net, Wade Redden, Danny Heatley. That team had a lot of characters. They had a great run. They ultimately fall short against Ryan Getzlaf and that great team from Anaheim. But I look at Alfredsson. He had an 18-year career, 17 in Ottawa. And he's a sixth-round draft pick, which is impressive. He had 426 goals, 682 assists. So he had over 1,000 points, which is great. He won a Calder Trophy. He's a captain for 13 years. He won Olympic gold. But something doesn't sit well with me with Daniel Alfredsson getting in because he was never the best player in the world. Can you tell the history books of the NHL without Daniel Alfredsson? To me, you can. The Hall of Fame is the Hall of Fame. It's not the Hall of Very Good. Alfredsson, I like a lot, but I have a very high standard. Martin St. Louis shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame if it was up to me. There's guys I look at and I'm like, why did he get in? Guy Carbonneau, not a Hall of Famer. I think there are people that just look at it and say, well, this guy played for this amount of years. He has to get in. That's not how it should work. Just because you played 18 years doesn't mean you had a great career. Get your pension, retire, you got lots of money. Great. That doesn't mean you get into the Hall of Fame. Alfredsson's been eligible since 2017. He's had a long wait. And I wonder why now. You got to vote players in. But to me, he's going in with three guys in Luongo and the Sedin twins that are absolute locks. Is he going in with this group because of his connection? He's Swedish, as are the Sedins. Does he go in because they're all Swedish? They all need to go in together? Alfredsson was a very good player, a very good captain. But is he a Hockey Hall of Famer? I don't think he is. To me, he isn't. And people in Ottawa, I got some messages from people, Ottawa fans last week. They didn't like that I talked about the Senators being 2 years away from being 2 years away. Well, they are. Alfredsson was a great player. Alfredsson was a good player who played for a team in Canada. But If he played for New Jersey, would he be in the Hall of Fame? If he played for Columbus, would he be in the Hall of Fame? I'm not so sure. I'm really not, because guys who play in Canada that are put in leadership positions, after they're finished their careers are looked at more fondly because they were captains in a Canadian market. Saku Koivu was a good player, not a great one. He was okay. He's looked at as a much better player because he was the captain of the Montreal Canadiens. Point blank. He wasn't an all-star player. He was an okay player. He was average. But he's looked at as a great player because he was a captain of the Montreal Canadiens. That happens in Canada. The Sedins were transcendent. There were guys taken in the top of the draft that absolutely validated that status. Alfredsson, you look at his career, he was a 6th-round draft pick, turned it into a fantastic career. But Andre Palat was a 7th-round draft pick. He's won 2 cups. Is he a Hockey Hall of Famer? No. I'm sure I'd love to hear people's opinion on this. If you're listening to the podcast, leave me a note, write me in the comments. We do the show tomorrow. Let me know, because I'd like to get a dialogue about this. Is Daniel Alfredsson a Hockey Hall of Famer? To me, he's not. Good player, good career. Not a great player with a great career. That's the difference. He won an Olympic gold medal. Okay. But he didn't win a cup. He didn't win a Hart. He didn't win a Rocket. Won a Calder. That award is very hollow to me. Especially now when 27-year-olds are finished second in the voting for the Calder Trophy. Shout out Michael Bunting. But I have no problem with the list other than Alfredsson. I just don't view him as a Hockey Hall of Famer. A really, really solid career. And I think it's fitting that Luongo is going in with the Sedin twins. He was their teammate for a very long time. For over a decade, he was teammates with the Sedin twins. And, they battled Boston together. They went through a lot. But that's not, I don't view these guys as, I don't view Alfredsson in that same category. I don't view them as the same people in the same type conversation. So that's where the rubber doesn't meet the road for me. And I view Alfredsson and I say he shouldn't be in the same discussion, in the same hall as these men, because he's just not as good. So that was just announced, just like I said, about 15 minutes ago. And that's news on the podcast, but I thought we'd bring it up today. We also got some more hockey news. This is another interesting story. Boston Bruins just now extended general manager Don Sweeney to a multi-year extension. So I'm guessing 3 years. That's normally what multi-year means. And when they lay out this kind of language. But this is surprising to me because a little bit, because Don Sweeney was going into his last year, so they wanted to give him some security. But Don Sweeney's been in Boston a long time. Don Sweeney and Cam Neely have been in Boston a long time, and they've had some very good success. But in recent months, in the past couple of years, they've made moves that were a little surprising to me. Trading for Hampus Lindholm and then signing an 8-year deal was something that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Signing John Moore, a defenseman from New Jersey, to a 5-year contract, which that contract can only be described as unmitigated disaster, was a surprising one to me. And as I just mentioned, didn't work out. Signing Linus Ullmark to a 5-year deal at $5 million, and he ends up sitting on the bench in favor of Jeremy Swayman in the playoffs. Didn't turn out to be a very good contract. Not trading Jake DeBrusk at the deadline and getting something in return for him. Surprising, letting that hang over the team the whole year, having that cloud hang over the team. Then there's the David Pastrnak of it all. He's not signed to an extension. He's pissed off with the team. Does he stay in Boston? You're going to let Don Sweeney work out the extension with this player. And I guess the player and the GM are not on great terms. So that doesn't sound great. Through all of this, yes, he still has Marchand. Yes, he signed good contracts with Marchand, with Bergeron. And it looks like Patrice Bergeron is going to return on a 1-year contract. I got that wrong. I thought he was retiring. But you fired Bruce Cassidy. And Bruce Cassidy was scooped up in 5 seconds on the open market. He got to pick the team he went to. He picked Vegas. And Sweeney is, he's a New Brunswicker. He's from St. Stephen. He's been in the organization since 2006 with the front office, been the GM since 2015. It's coming on 8 years that he's been the general manager. He's got big decisions to make because Boston is in a situation right now where they're old. Their goaltending is very much up in the air. As I mentioned, they got some really bad contracts on this roster. They just had a ton of players go through real surgeries that are going to keep them out to start next season. So where does this team go? Do they make a push for Nazem Kadri? Do they make a push for Mark Scheifele? What does Boston do to stay competitive, or do they blow it up? And is Don Sweeney the man to do it? To me, he's a guy that's going to want to keep this team competitive. He's a guy that's going to want to make sure the Boston Bruins are staying relevant. Because otherwise, I think you bring in a new GM with a different vision to rebuild this core. He won the GM of the Year award in 2019. But to me, he was a Boston Bruin. He played there, played for 15 years for the Bruins. And just because he played there, do not become the Edmonton Oilers with the old boys club. You got Cam Neely, you got Don Sweeney. Just because you have guys that played for the organization doesn't mean you're making the right hire. They need to really look in the mirror and decide who's going to be making these decisions. Because to me, Don Sweeney has not been a great general manager. A sip of water here. He's been adequate. He's made more bad decisions than good decisions over the last 3 to 4 years. So why is he getting a multi-year extension and Bruce Cassidy was fired in the last year of his contract? Because I'll tell you what, if the Boston Bruins lose in the first round again this year, this upcoming season, or worse, say they miss the playoffs, something happens, Don Sweeney should be fired. I don't care if he has 2 years left in his deal. What happens? He decided to fire the coach. They haven't named their head coach yet. There's still 3 openings for head coaches. Boston, Winnipeg, and Detroit. I have no clue who Boston is going to hire. I haven't heard anything on that front yet. My spidey sense says to me they might hire Mark Savard, their former player. Again, the old boys club, where they just keep bringing ex-Bruins in. That would really elevate my theory. But maybe they won't hire him. Maybe they'll hire Jay Leach, who was on the bench already. We'll have to wait and see what the Bruins do. But I don't understand Don Sweeney getting an extension where Bruce Cassidy gets fired, where Don Sweeney is hampering the team, signing bad contracts, and hurting Bruce Cassidy's ability to field a great team. Having John Moore as an option. Signing Hampus Lindholm long-term. Having Linus Ullmark on the bench in the playoffs because he's unplayable at $5 million. These are Don Sweeney moves, not Bruce Cassidy. Not addressing Jake DeBrusk in his no trade. Signing Charlie Coyle to a long-term extension. Those are Don Sweeney. That's not Bruce Cassidy. And yet one guy gets fired, one guy gets extended. That's sometimes where the GM, I think these teams give the GM way too long a leash. And you forget to look at who's making the fuck-ups and who isn't. Who's giving. Sometimes you look at the meal and you say, well, God, that meal sucked. Well, who bought the groceries? Who bought day old, spinach? You're making a sub and all your vegetables are day olds, or they're been out of the fridge for a day and a half, and the guy, you just hand it to the chef. The meal isn't going to be good because the guy who was supposed to give you all the ingredients screwed it up. And I think that can be what happens here. But I think Mark Savard could be an option for the Bruins. Again, I have no information on that. That's just a gut instinct. He's recently coaching the Windsor Spitfires. They got beat out in the OHL final. We'll wait and see on that. Winnipeg wanted Barry Trotz. He said to the team, no, he's going to worry about his family. I know his father is sick. I think also that Winnipeg team, I wouldn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. I wouldn't want to coach that team. There's a lot of toxicity there, a lot of negativity. It's not a great job. It used to be. It isn't now. I wouldn't want that job because a lot's going to have to change. Detroit, to me, they had their guy all along. They're going to hire Jeff Halpern. That's who I believe they'll hire. He's the assistant coach on the Tampa Bay bench. He was a former NHL, played for Detroit, played for Tampa Bay, played for Montreal. He was a fourth-line center, but he's been running the forwards in Tampa Bay for the last 3 to 4 seasons with John Cooper. To me, Yzerman knows him, and he's going to bring him on and be the head coach since he left Jeff Blashill go. So that's where I think Detroit's going to go. That's who I think Detroit will hire. They're going to hire Jeff Halpern. Winnipeg, I have no idea. I didn't think Paul Maurice would be a head coach again. He is. Detroit, Winnipeg's going to have to make a decision on a coach. The draft is a week from Thursday. So you want your head coach in by then, that's for sure. There's still a few guys available. Luke Richardson got hired in Chicago. I'm happy for Luke. He's been the assistant coach in Montreal for a long time. Dominic Ducharme kind of took the reins, and then he was let go, and he's on that staff kind of hanging around with Martin St. Louis. But he earned this opportunity. He coached them in the playoffs briefly when Ducharme had COVID. So sometimes you just got to take a job. Chicago's not a great job. But if he can rebuild a culture, if he can rebuild a competitive team, he'll be on top of the world and he'll have a job in the NHL for a long time. But it's good to see a guy that's not just a retread get a job. To me, Paul Maurice getting the job in Florida is really baffling to me. He said he wanted out of the game for a while, but then he'll take the Florida job. He hasn't won a thing in the NHL. He went to a Stanley Cup final in 2002. That was 20 years ago. It reeks of desperation where they didn't bring Andrew Burnett back, and they bring in Paul Maurice, who didn't make a Stanley Cup final in Winnipeg, didn't make a Stanley Cup final in Toronto, and they're asking him to do something he hasn't done in 20 years. I have a hard time seeing it work. I do think Paul Maurice is a good coach. I think he's a good interview. He's a good guy in the game. But let's be honest, he's a retread. He's a guy that's failed everywhere he's gone. And yet, Florida, I'm sure, would have liked to hire Barry Trotz. They would have liked to make a different spot. Peter DeBoer is similar. At least Peter DeBoer has been to 2 Stanley Cup finals. Paul Maurice can't say that. Halpern's a new hire. Luke Richardson's a new hire. Do we see Winnipeg go outside the box a little bit? Mark Savard would be a little bit outside the box. He hasn't coached. He's been assistant coach in St. Louis under Craig Berube before he took the Windsor job. We still got those 3 openings to decide. And like I said, the draft is a week from Thursday, I believe. It's either a week from Thursday or a week from Friday. I believe round 1's a week from Thursday. So you got to make those decisions because these teams, are on the clock, and you want your coach to be in place as you start to build, for the future. But Don Sweeney gets an extension. That surprised me today. I did not see that coming. Didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But what do I know? Then another NHL story. There was the Stanley Cup final. There's a lot of little news today. Nothing major, but all this stuff, little news. The Toronto Maple Leafs extended restricted free agent defenseman Timothy Liljegren to a 2-year, $2.8 million deal, which is $1.4 million a season. The 23-year-old defenseman has played 74 games in his career and has been basically a 6th, 7th defense, 6th to 8th defenseman since he's been brought up to the NHL level. But for Liljegren, he gets a one-way contract, his first one in his career, and now he's likely got a roster spot because he's going to have to clear waivers to go back to the American Hockey League. To me, money is not everything, but it's pretty damn important in today's game. And for the Maple Leafs, they have no money because they spent all their money on their forwards. So what we've heard from that team is they're not trading their forward group. their core is staying put. They're not trading Nylander. They're obviously not trading Matthews. Marner's staying. You trade Tavares for a hobo's foot, but nobody's taking that deal right now. He's staying in Toronto, so you're stuck with that. Well, you brought Mark Giordano back. He's 39. It's a good contract. It's good money. The second year, obviously, I wouldn't have wanted. And I don't know how great he'll be next year, but it looks good on paper. He's from Toronto. He's another guy with the pajamas. Good media signing. Great. Timothy Liljegren has proven absolutely nothing at the NHL level. He's proven nothing. He hasn't proven that he can play at the NHL level consistently because he's a healthy scratch every other game. He was a healthy scratch for Justin Hall in the playoffs, if you can recall. Justin Hall played over Timothy Liljegren. So that tells you just how valuable Timothy Liljegren was because he was a healthy scratch in games 5, 6, and 7 over Justin Hall. This was Sheldon Keefe. This is the head coach, healthy scratching. And this wasn't conjecture. This wasn't Sheldon Keefe saying, well, that's your opinion. No, that was definitive. You did not play him. He was a healthy scratch. So you have a guy that couldn't play in the playoffs, is unproven in the regular season, is unproven that he can play consistently at the NHL level. Why is he getting $1.4 million a year? Timothy Liljegren is an $800,000 defenseman. That should be 2 years at whatever that is, 1.4. 1.4 should be the money for this deal. That should be the deal. 1.6, 1.5, whatever it is, over 2 years. Okay, if it has to be a one-way contract, it has to be a one-way contract. But he's proven nothing that he can play at the NHL level, and you're signing him to $1.4 million? Why? Well, because it's the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they reward people for doing nothing, for proving nothing. He's an $800,000 defenseman. Justin Hall earned the $2.1 million more than Timothy Liljegren has earned $1.4 million a year. And Hall hasn't turned out to be great, but he earned getting that because he played an extended period of time. He wasn't a healthy scratch game in, game out. You want to give some hope to the kid. You want him to feel good about himself. He was your draft pick for Kyle Dubas. You don't want to see him wrong, like you got just a dud of a defenseman that you drafted in the first round. I'm not saying he's a dud. I'm not saying he's a guy that can't play on a roster. But what I am saying is he has not proven that he's worth $1.4 million. So in my brain, that's stupid. That's a bad signing. It makes no sense. I don't understand. I don't get the rationale for this. You're telling me as a restricted free agent, a team is going to offer Timothy Liljegren an offer sheet? Who's offering Timothy Liljegren an offer sheet? Okay, let them. You're going to match it? Who's offering him more than $1 million out there? Nobody. It's just baffling to me that a team that is dying for the cap to move up and they're complaining about certain things and it's all, well, you're overpaying a defenseman. So I don't want to hear that you have no money, that it's a hard cap, that, well, we could do more. The cap's the cap. It's the same for everybody. You're overpaying a guy for what he's given you so far. You're projecting that he's going to be better. Good luck. Because your coach, and as far as I know, he's going to be your coach going into next season because you're not going to make a change, of course. He didn't play him in the playoffs. He didn't trust him. He didn't think he was good enough to play in those type of situations in favor of Justin Hall. So is that going to change overnight? Is that changing throughout the summer? They're going to have a seminar and say, hey, Dubas going to say, hey, Sheldon, I know we're frustrated with Liljegren, but you're going to play him next year. Maybe that's happening because otherwise this makes no sense. No sense. $800,000. Okay, he's over the league min. He earned just above the league min. Way to go. You don't want that contract? Go back to Sweden. Kick rocks because nobody's giving you a cent more. Tell JP Barry, to whoever the hell is representing him. Alan Walsh, this is all you're getting. Because your client has proven jack shit. Matthews, okay, earned the contract, all this stuff. I get it. It's a low, 1.4 million is not a big salary in the NHL. But when you have a hard cap world and your team has a bunch of big contracts where you don't have any money, every penny counts. And clearly, they don't think it does because they'll just give extra money to a defenseman that isn't worth a fuck. I don't get it. I don't get it. This should be simple. $800,000. Thanks. Thank you so much, Toronto, for re-signing me, because otherwise I'd be up shit creek. Because who fucking wants him? Open market, I'm not sure he gets a one-way deal. I truly mean that. He might get a two-way American Hockey League deal. But he's a guy that has no leverage, has no experience, no accolades, healthy scratch in the playoffs. He gets $1.4 million. Way to go, Kyle Dubas. Keep up the good work, buddy. Might not be employed there that much longer. Might be one of your last contracts you signed. Oh, fired up today, but I saw that this afternoon, and I was baffled by it. I'm trying to help these teams. I don't think they think I am, but I'm really trying. I just don't. I don't get it. I just don't get it. You know. Let's pivot to baseball. As we just coming on the 5 o'clock here, I'm just reading that the Toronto Blue Jays are close to signing veteran relief pitcher Sergio Romo to a contract. Romo is a two-time World Series champion with the San Francisco Giants. That was his best baseball in 2012 to 2016. Since then, he's been on 5 different teams. He's bounced around. You know, he began the season with the Mariners, but was hit hard, 17 appearances, pitching to an ERA of 8.19 and 14 1/3 innings, and he was released. But he was an All-Star in 2013, won 3 World Series, so he won in 2010 as well. I was a big fan of Romo back in the day. I thought he was a really, really good relief pitcher. He's got a weird stance. But like I said, since then, he spent time with the Dodgers, the Athletics, the Rays, and the Miami Marlins. And this is the Blue Jays signing a guy because they're desperate to get another arm because they play a lot of baseball this week. They got 3 against the Red Sox beginning tonight at the Rogers Center. And then they have a 4-game series against the Tampa Bay Rays that starts on Thursday. They got a Canada Day special game. But let's be honest, the Toronto Blue Jays pitching sucks. Jose Barrios is a human gas can right now because he is getting hit all over the park. Another 8 earned runs yesterday in 2 2/3 innings. Gives up 2 2-run homers to Rowdy Tellez, the former Blue Jay. And these guys can't give them any kind of innings. Barrios has a 5.50 or 5.75 ERA. Yusei Kikuchi is averaging 3 2/3 a start, giving them no length. He's been terrible. Barrios has been bad. Gausman has been wildly inconsistent. He's not giving them big innings. The only guy that you know is going to give you a quality start every 5th day is Alek Manoah. He went 6 2/3 over the weekend. He was very good in a victory for the Toronto Blue Jays. Other than Manoah, nobody has been consistent. Nobody's pitching well. The bullpen isn't pitching well because they're tired. And you also look at the bats. They're in a playoff spot. They're in a good position despite all of this anarchy. But you're playing the White Sox who are struggling. You're playing teams. You got a tough schedule now. You dropped 2 or 3 to the Brewers who are in a dogfight for the National League Central. You got the Red Sox you got 3 against the Red Sox this week who are on fire. They are not losing right now, the Boston Red Sox. They're so far back of the Blue Jays, so far back of the Rays, and now they've surpassed them. They're getting decent pitching innings. Their bats, they have 3 guys batting over 340. That is old school baseball. JD Martinez, Rafael Devers, one of the best players in baseball, and Xander Bogaerts are batting over 340. They're starting to get production from Christian Vasquez, who was slow to start the season catching, and he's a decent hitter for a catcher. So they're a legitimate threat. Their pitching is not as good as the Blue Jays on paper, but that doesn't mean anything right now. Because the Blue Jays, Barrios is a supposed ace. He's been horrible for them. And as we head into this series, the Boston Red Sox have a 1.5 game lead over the Blue Jays for the top wildcard spot. The Blue Jays are tied with the Tampa Bay Rays for the second wildcard spot with a 40-32 record. Cleveland is 2 games back of both teams, although they have 4 games in hand. They're 36-32. Then you followed by the White Sox, who are 5.5 back. Maybe the White Sox will never find their game. I thought they would. They split their series this weekend against the Baltimore Orioles. That's not a good sign for the White Sox. I do think they're a better team. They should be able to compete. They should be able to be a better team than the Cleveland Guardians. They're better than the Cleveland Guardians. They're better than the Minnesota Twins. It just doesn't show it on the record. But for the Blue Jays, New York is 13 games up on them. New York has 20 losses. And, they split against the Houston Astros. Astros are a very good team. They got 45 wins themselves, which is tied for the third most wins in Major League Baseball with the Los Angeles Dodgers. But you got a series against these two teams, the Red Sox and the Rays, the two teams you're competing with, because it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to catch the Yankees. Let's just be honest. With the pitching that you got, and yes, there's a lot of season left, but 12, that's a big, you're not making up that many games. But you want to put yourself in the best position, and it starts in a series like this. Because for the Red Sox, you're riding high. You beat the Guardians yesterday. You're coming in from Cleveland, and you got a 3-game set. You want to see what you can do. You want to test yourself against a very good team. Then you got the Rays for 4, who has Shane Baz is starting to pitch better. Shane McClanahan is pitching some of the best pitching some of the best in all of baseball right now. They got some really good pitching options in Tampa Bay. Boston, not so much. So you need to take advantage of that. Vladdy Guerrero Jr. has been adequate this year. He hasn't been his MVP self. He hasn't looked like an all-star. Other than Alejandro Kirk, nobody for the Toronto Blue Jays is playing all that great. Alejandro Kirk has been one of the best stories in baseball because of his production. Every game he has to be in the lineup, whether he's catching or whether he's batting, because of just his production, RBIs, hitting home runs, and keeping the Blue Jays in games. He is the leading vote getter for the Blue Jays for the All-Star game. More than Guerrero, more than Springer, more than any other player, he's the top, more than Manoah. Yesterday, he went 2 for 4 with 3 RBIs and a home run. He's batting .322 on the season. While Vladdy Guerrero is batting .268. And yes, Vladdy has more home runs than Alejandro Kirk. He's got 17. But Kirk's had a better season. When it comes just to being consistent, Kirk has been a more consistent player than Vladdy Guerrero Jr. So this is a big, for all these teams in the American League wildcard, this is a massive stretch. Red Sox, you got 3. And then you go on. For the Rays, you got 3. And then you get to play the Blue Jays. And you see what you can do against them. It's a measuring stick type game, but it's also take advantage of your opportunity. For the Rays, they played the Brewers twice, and then they got the Blue Jays. So it's no easy cakewalk for them either. The Brewers are playing good baseball. They're getting good production. Corbin Burns is one of the best pitchers in all of baseball as well. So, and through all of this, you look around, you say, well, the Blue Jays are a good team. The Red Sox are a good team. The Rays are a good team. But the Yankees are the best team because their pitching has been really solid. And Aaron Judge is the best player in baseball right now. Another walk-off hit yesterday. He has 2 walk-off hits in the series. A 3-run shot to end the game. He has 28 home runs, which leads all of Major League Baseball. Just signed his arbitration deal for 19. They settled before it got to arbitration. He's going to be a free agent. It's been a rock star season for Aaron Judge. He decided not to sign their contract, and it's worked out for him so far. He's riding high. He's playing well. The Yankees are playing well. The Yankees are starting to get a swagger about them, where, to me, Stanton has always provided a sense of cockiness just with his stance, just with the way he hits a baseball. When he hits a homer, it's gone about 100 feet, and he just provides that. Josh Donaldson is a unlikable figure. The series against the Blue Jays, he gets plunked by a ball, throws his bat, then hits a dinger later in the game, pimps it out, and gives it to the fans of Toronto. This Yankees team are getting vibes of the Toronto teams in 2015 and 2016 that had some success. Because those Toronto teams, and I get if you're a Blue Jays fan, you might disagree with this, but they weren't likable. Bautista was not a likable player. He was an asshole. Josh Donaldson was a bit of an asshole. David Price was a bit of an asshole. You go through those teams, they weren't. Tulowitzki, don't even get me started on him. These guys weren't the most likable team, but they won games and it didn't matter. I think for the Yankees, they have the same thing. They just have a sense. When Aroldis Chapman's in the lineup, he's a very unlikable figure. I don't think many people around baseball like him. He's got an aura about him. But for these Yankees, they continue to win. Aaron Judge continues to put up big numbers. And that's all for them. That's all that matters. Get the best record in the American League and give yourself the best position to be in the best spot to get to the World Series come playoff time. And to their credit, the Yankees have done that so far. And outside, you look at this point of the season, there are no huge shockers. The Mets are better than I thought. I thought the Mets would be good. The fact that the Mets have the best record in the National League, where Scherzer hasn't pitched in over a month and DeGrom has not pitched at all, is surprising to me. They're 20 games above 500 right now, the Mets. That's surprising. They have a better record than the Los Angeles Dodgers. Another surprising development for me for June 27th to be here. That is surprising. The San Diego Padres to be 15 games over 500 is a tad bit surprising because of Fernando Tatis Jr. III not playing a game this year. My favorite player, one of the best players in baseball. They got to hope he can be back potentially mid-July and they can continue on this pace. Clevenger's been a disaster. Blake Snell hasn't been good, and yet they continue to find ways to win. Machado's on the IL. I mean, you look, Machado's on the IL. Bryce Harper hurt his thumb yesterday. He's on the IL. That could basically derail the Phillies season. DeGrom's on the IL. Scherzer's on the IL. There's a lot of great players that are unavailable right now in baseball. That's not good for the sport either, that you have all your best players hurt because, as I mentioned at the top of the show, hockey is finished. Basketball is finished. There's no NFL until early August when it comes to preseason, when that really becomes a top-of-mind focus. This is your opportunity to grab the sport. And, I think the brawl in LA helps yesterday. It was a topic of discussion. They had a guest on the Dan Patrick Show today talk about it with the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim and the Seattle Mariners. And sometimes a negative story is a good one, where, yes, the brawl can be looked at as a negative story. You don't like fighting in the game, whatever. But also the Angels being so pathetic, being 6.5 games out of the final wild card spot in the end of June, and having Shohei Ohtani and having Mike Trout can be looked at as a positive thing or a negative thing, because it is a topic. It is something you can bring up and say, wow, the Angels are this bad again. And that's something you can at least have a chat about. That's a topic of conversation where later in the year you can say, well, why am I going to watch baseball? Who am I watching? If the Mets and Yankees are both good, that's good for baseball. You'd like for the Angels to be relevant, to be involved in a playoff push, because you want to see Mike Trout, the best player in baseball. You want to see Shohei Ohtani, the most dynamic player in baseball, pitch. But it's unlikely you're going to get that. But as we look at here, Philly's a 1.5 games back of the final wild card, but they lose Bryce Harper. He wasn't playing in the field to begin with because he's dinged up. He's out for long term. I don't like Philly's chances of competing for a playoff spot. San Francisco is a half game out of the final wildcard spot. I thought they'd have a tough year, and that's kind of the way it's been going. St. Louis is in that final wildcard spot right now, although they're only a half game back of the Milwaukee Brewers, who they're chasing, and they've been back and forth. Then there's Atlanta, who's a game and a half back of the San Diego Padres. So, there is some interesting development here. You want to see some races. Like the Mets have a 2-game lead over the Dodgers for the best record in the American League. You'd like that to be a race down the stretch. But for baseball, this is your time to shine. This is where you have to go out there and put on a great product, because no time is better than right now to be relevant. No time is better than right now to put up a great product, to get people on the show, to get people to watch your product, because what else are they going to watch? Yes, it's summer. Yes, it's warm up, but people are still going to watch sports when they get home from work. And you get home from work, get a couple hours, you throw on a ball game. That is what you got to hope for. That's what you got to hope you can provide to people, a good product, and maybe people will become interested in the sport and watch it more religiously as they move forward. That is what you got to hope for. We'll see if it happens. And I'm intrigued to see where this goes with baseball. But Jays Red Sox should be an interesting series down the stretch here. Memorial Cup. I mentioned hockey's almost over. It's not over yet because we got the Memorial Cup, the semifinal tonight, and the gold medal / Memorial Cup final game on Wednesday. Tournament is crazy. St. John Sea Dogs have booked their ticket to the final, the host team. The Sea Dogs lost to the Edmonton Oil Kings. So you'd think, well, the team that's in the final, the Oil Kings are the only team not to make the semi. I thought they'd win the tournament. Massive disappointment. The WHL curse continues as another WHL team cannot raise the Memorial Cup. They haven't in, I believe, 6 to 7 years now. Tonight, you have the Hamilton Bulldogs playing against the Shawinigan Cataracts. I saw these two teams play last Thursday. It was a 3-2 win for the Cataracts. I like to say it's the Cataracts. And kudos to the Hamilton Bulldogs. They lose Thursday. They go on a back-to-back on Friday, and they find a way to beat the Oil Kings to get to this position. And Logan Morrison and Avery Hayes, who did not play well when I went and saw them, delivered on Friday night. Mason McTavish has been scoring goals. He got the game winner on Friday. His effort's been inconsistent. He's not a guy that works overly hard for pucks. I think that's something he's going to need to work on at the next level is his compete level. I think also his conditioning. I think he's a guy that needs to drop 10 pounds and really come into shape, come into camp in better shape. Still a very good player, still has an incredible shot. But in tonight's game, Marco Constantini has been great for the Hamilton Bulldogs in net. You look at the other side for the Cataracts, Kalam has been very solid as well. But to me, the other night, Maverick Bourque was the best player on the ice for the Cataracts. He drove that game. He drove the line, and it ultimately prevailed. They end up winning the game. I view it the same way tonight. I look at it as Maverick Bourque versus Logan Morrison. Logan Morrison's number 9. He's the leader on the Bulldogs. If they win tonight, he's going to have to be a difference maker. He plays in that top line with Avery Hayes. They're going to have to produce something early and often tonight and not trail the game, because the Cataracts do a good job at limiting opportunities, limiting scoring chances. So that has to be the focus tonight for the Bulldogs, to get a lead and for Logan Morrison and Avery Hayes to be their best players. Both guys are undrafted free agents. I think Logan Morrison for sure is going to get looks at the NHL level. Wouldn't surprise me on Avery Hayes either. But these guys, if they can have a good end to this tournament, get to a final, that can only help them. Gives them more of a spotlight, one extra game for scouts to watch. I was there the other night. Jason Spezza and Kyle Dubas were in the building. I know there were more scouts than that. So there's lots of hockey minds are watching you and thinking how you could fit into their plans, either in the short term or in the long term. So that is really what I've got my eyes on tonight. Some baseball action as well. And like I said, I'll talk a little bit more Gardner McDougall tomorrow because I think that's an interesting story as well. I'll preview the final. But I want to hear your take on Daniel Everton. Do you think I'm out of bounds? Do you think I'm right in that decision? Is he a Hall of Famer? Is Daniel Everton a Hall of Famer? Because to me, he isn't, but I can be swayed either way. I'd like to have a conversation. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll bring them up tomorrow. Let me know what you think, and I'll discuss it on tomorrow's show. Tomorrow, Seamus will join me, as always, tomorrow. We're going to talk about NBA free agency. We're going to make some predictions. It starts on Friday. We're going to say where some players are going to go, what happens with Kyrie Irving, DeAndre Ayton, what we thought of the draft. So those type NBA discussions tomorrow, preview the Memorial Cup final, and lots of other things as well. So great to be back today. Great to talk to all of you. Stay healthy, stay happy, and we'll talk tomorrow. This is To The Point.